Welcome to Painting Like Edward Hopper. This is a video series where I try to paint like a famous artist. So down in the comments, sometimes people are like, "What? This isn't Hopper," but this is painting like Hopper. So we look at Hopper's paintings and we kind of dissect his visual language a little bit, and we try to emulate that in one of our own paintings. So we're not copying a Hopper painting, we're trying to create a painting like Hopper. So let's get into it. So let's look at some works by Edward Hopper before we begin painting here. This is a painting called Four Lanes. And the first thing that strikes us about this painting is that neither of the subjects are really engaging us. They're both looking away from the viewer, indicating that something is probably happening over here that we don't know about. But it's not a painting where the figures in it are confronting the viewer by looking at them. We're looking at the painting as if we're a voyeur in this circumstance, looking upon these other people, wondering about what's happening in their lives. It's also a very leisurely moment. There's not a lot of action or excitement happening. About the most exciting thing is this woman coming out of the window here. And we can see that it is a gas station because there's a gas pump right here. Now, if we start thinking about just the technical aspects of this painting, we can see there's a really limited color palette, meaning there's not a lot of different colors that were used in the creation of this work. You can see this little cigarette, that's kind of cool. And a lot of times we don't realize how simplified these things are because our eyes look at areas like the side of the face here from a distance, and we don't really realize that this is just one big shape. Look, there's not even a differentiation between his jawline and his neck. It's all just one color running throughout the whole thing. Look at that ear. Look how simple that ear is. It's just a little patch of color right there. So that's one thing with Hopper. We don't want to overdo the details too much. There's almost an impressionistic style that's being put forth in the creation of these works. Another thing that we notice is there's a really strong diagonal here coming in, and that's something that's really common with Edward Hopper paintings. And we often have Hopper creating works that are done in full sunlight. So there's a lot of brightness. Look at this white. This is very kind of typical Hopper here. But look at the shadow. The shadows are very sharp, indicating that there's a very, very strong light source coming in to this piece. So we're going to try to take a photo early in the day, I would say, probably around noon. I guess that's early in the day for some people. But you want to, between like 10 o'clock and noon, maybe face to the south. That would also be good. And we want that strong sunlight coming in on our figures. So if you're doing your own painting like Hopper painting, you want to create an image that's taken in that sort of sunlight. The other thing, look at these blues down here. We're going to be using those blues. We're going to be using this kind of greenish brown that he's using as well for his flesh tones. These will be quite similar too. I never even noticed that cigarette before. That's kind of nice. Cigarette at the gas station. It's a good idea. And we can also see, look at these two diagonals. Look at everything is pointing to this figure. That diagonal points to the figure, that diagonal points to the figure, that diagonal points to the figure. This woman is looking at the figure. In case you didn't know, this figure is the focal point of the painting. So when you're creating your own photograph and taking your own photograph of your own subject, think about how can you use these architectural elements in the painting to help reinforce your composition and make it strong. Of course, another compositional element here, this is the most classic one. Go about 2/3 over, and it's about 2/3 down. Generally is the most interesting thing. Or generally is the most important part of many, many compositions. You'll find this time and time and time again, that people break their compositions into thirds, and this is the perfect example. Here's the top third, here's the middle third, here's the bottom third. And this figure is basically on a third of the way this way. So that's a really common thing that we see. So think about that when you're creating your compositions as well. If you have a grid on your camera, that's a good thing to bring up if you have that grid. And then you can just figure out where to put your subjects in your composition when you're taking that photograph. So get out and take some photos, and let's get to painting. Now, what we're going to be doing is just making a simple grid and gridding these lines out. And we're going to grid every, let's say every 2 inches on this. And we'll go through that process, and then we're going to grid our canvas at the same ratio of squares. It's simpler than it sounds, and I'll get into it in the next section. So you've got your photo printed out. Just grab a ruler, and I'm going to grid this every inch. See, this is 1 inch over here, that's 1 inch over there. Good. Then we just do these sides. And then just so I have a bit of reference, I like to letter and number these too. So now that we've got everything gridded out, we're going to want to start drawing this image on our canvas here. And by using this, it really forces us to stay within this grid framework. Often what happens is we get started on the figure, we make the figure a little bit too big, then all of a sudden everything gets too big, and this gets cut off, and this gets cut off, and all of our compositional decisions that we made in the beginning go out the window because our proportions were off. So that's what we're going to be doing here with our drawings. We can just draw on this, you know, a little bit, make these lines a little bit more apparent. This one gets lost a little bit. So just draw out these lines a little bit on top of here, and then begin copying them. So we can see this one intersects this line that we did here. It goes almost all the way up here. So that lines up there too. So look at where these points intersect. That's about that same intersection as that there. Okay? And just fill in your drawing from here on out. Should take a couple hours. So now I've got the drawing all done, and admittedly I had to use the ruler all over the place on this thing. But one good way of going at it, for instance, you could be like, I'm on 3, you know, 3, and it goes up to right about here on 3, and then it goes right to the beginning of D and E down here. So you could kind of, you know, get these main 2 points in first and then just draw a line in between them. So this took a lot longer than I expected. All this siding, that's going to be a bit of a nightmare. But we're going to jump into it. Notice how the figure is not the most important thing, and I have an assignment called Hide the Figure, which is treating everything the same way. And one thing with Hopper is that he kind of treats the figure in a really similar way to the way he treats architectural things. It's not like the figure is the most prominent thing. It's kind of nestled within this entire environment. So now that we've got it all drawn in, we're going to go on to the next step and analyze some of Hopper's colors, and we're going to mix up a whole bunch of these colors ourselves. That's why this image here is in black and white. We don't want to think about the colors. We want to use Hopper's colors for this painting. So now what you're going to do is go to Google and search out some different paintings, figure out which painting you want to use. I'm going to be using 4 Lane Road 1956 as a source point for my colors. I like that it's a seated figure, which I have. There's strong daylight, which I have as well. And just the general color scheme, there's actually red in the door as well. I know that because I know the house, so I'll be able to incorporate basically all of these colors. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take this image and you're going to download it. You just download by holding your finger on the image. You can go to download image there. And once you have it downloaded, this just allows you to zoom into it more effectively. And we're just gonna start looking at this almost like an abstract painting. So we can just look at this blue, you know, or this red here, and we're just gonna be starting to mix up blobs of these colors on our palette. We can actually just set our phone right next to our palette and blend as we go. So here we've got my favorite little palette. Got Ivory Black, Burnt Umber, Alizarin Crimson, Phthalo Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Cad Red, Cad Yellow, Titanium White. And that's what we're going to be using. And then we've got our image here that we've downloaded, and we can just put that next to our palette and just look right at that color. So let's get into the first color, and then I'll time lapse it from there. So I'm looking at this yellow. Obviously we know that has to start with yellow. And color mixing is always, you know, just about tuning your brain to the right frequencies. That's what it's about. Add a little bit of burnt umber to that. You can see I'm already getting pretty close. And we want a darker version of that one, so we're just going to take a little bit more burnt umber down here. That looks pretty good too. So that's all we're going to be doing, is mixing colors, putting our phone up next to it. Is that the right color? Is it not? And we're going to do that for a bunch of colors, and you'll see that in the time lapse coming up right now. Take a look at my setup. I've got all my colors pre-mixed there. I've got my painting all drawn out. I've got my work that I'm looking at actually here, so I can kind of reference that as I go as well. And I've got my image I'm working from printed out in black and white and gridded. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with the darkest colors that we see over here, and we're gonna start blocking in the darks that we see in here. I'm gonna cut to the time lapse now, and you're gonna be able to see that. I'm gonna be working dark to light with all these colors and looking around on this image here too. So in this stage, I'm just kind of sketching in these basic lines. Well, I'm not really sketching them. I'm trying to draw them pretty carefully. But I know in subsequent layers, these lines can be a little bit big. You know, this line is obviously not that big in my image. But when I come in with the next color, I can cover up that line and cut it down a little bit, and I can get a nice crisp, small line. So we want to get the big areas of dark in first. Just continue to block in the darkest areas that you see with your darkest color that you have mixed up based upon your Hopper painting. And then you're just going to mix up a little bit lighter color, go to that next lightest gray, going up that value scale, and start blocking in those areas of shadow as well. And if you want, you can even test your color on your photo itself by just putting it down there. Is that dark enough? Looks pretty close. Going back here, just start working those grays in. And we just continue mixing lighter colors. And it's kind of paint by numbers mode at this point. Just looking at the photograph, looking at my painting, comparing the darkness of the values to one another. And then we're going to go really white, and this is going to really change the overall feel of the entire painting. As I progress further into the painting, I just start using smaller brushes, but you can see this figure is really pretty simplified, and that's kind of how I like it. I want everything to be really simplified, and when you look at it from a distance, things kind of come together. So feedback time, you can see my palette. I used up almost all my colors. Ooh, I need a little bit of that pink. Maybe I should just grab some pink and use it quickly. So there we have it, a painting like Hopper. I think I'm kind of pleased with the results. I could keep going on this and tighten some things up a little bit more, but I'll wait till it dries and get into a little bit of fixing. But I think it's good to keep it really loose. And when you're done, you know, just look at your painting and then look at the painting that you were looking at and see, did that inspire this one? Did we pull some colors from this one? Did we pull some compositional tricks from this one? Stay tuned for more Painting Like every 2 weeks. And if you have a suggestion for who to do for a Painting Like, leave me a comment down below. Subscribe, hit the notifications, do all that so you can keep up with my videos. I've got Tuesday, Plein Air Tuesdays coming up, where I'm going to be doing a plein air painting outside. So that'll be fun, something to look forward to. Thanks for watching.